So, one of my first ever full-time jobs was being a video game store manager for a shopping mall retailer called Electronics Boutique, which branded a lot of its mall and strip mall stores in the early 2000s as EB Games. Electronics Boutique started out in the late 1970s as a kiosk in the King of Prussia Mall outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, selling digital watches and pocket calculators. It gradually moved into selling computers and software before pivoting into video games in the mid-1990s. Its chief competitors at the time were retailers like Software Etc., Babbage's, and FuncoLand, all of which got transformed into a larger company called GameStop, initially led by Lynn Riggio, the investor who'd revitalized Barnes & Noble into a major brand. GameStop adopted very similar branding and a similar store design to EB Games, and it was in 2005 that GameStop acquired EB Games in North America and absorbed it into their own brand. Now here's a fun fact. My last week on the job in 2007 happened to be the exact week when they replaced our EB Games store sign, and we had to start saying, "Thank you for calling GameStop" on the phone. Ugh. I was happy to be out of there because, and I guess it's okay to say this about 20 years later, I hated working for GameStop because they were an objectively awful company that made every day of my life miserable that final year. Their approach to paying for this big, expensive merger was to cut hours, cut bonuses, require more of managers, and to make us push sales for pre-orders for video games that were coming out. It all felt very Blockbuster Video during a time when that video rental brand was on the way out. Now, I'm bringing all of this up because GameStop is basically on its way out too. And today's news involves GameStop's very desperate bid to purchase eBay using a rather strange proposal that eBay's board just rejected. This is a marketing podcast, so I don't want to go too into the nuts and bolts of the financial mechanisms involved here, but let's just say it's like a bunch of kids working at a lemonade stand, shaking a jar of change and telling the ice cream truck that they've got enough money to buy him out of business once their dads get home and pay the rest of the tab. There is just no way that this was ever going to happen. And it's very likely a desperate move on the part of activist investor and CEO Ryan Cohen to get GameStop in the news so that its stock price will increase. Unfortunately, the move has backfired, and GameStop has already seen its stock price steadily drop since the announcement was made. And how bad does your offer have to be for eBay to put out a press release not only rejecting it, but saying it's neither credible nor attractive? That is basically business code words for ugly and stupid. And why is GameStop even trying to embark down this path in the first place? Well, as it turns out, GameStop has a long history of doing really strange things that have hurt its own business, and a lot of the problems stem from, you guessed it, really terrible marketing decisions. Well, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. So I've talked about my EB Games experiences before on the Marketing Gateway, but I haven't really detailed what happened when GameStop took over the company, mainly because I wasn't there for it. And I'm glad I wasn't because it was a mess. It started with GameStop going on a spending spree to buy out a lot of their competition. They acquired Rhino Video Games from Blockbuster and the European retailers Free Record Shop and Micromania in 2007 and 2008. Unfortunately for GameStop, one of the biggest changes in video gaming at the time, though, was that everything was starting to move to digital. iTunes was already disrupting the recording industry. Online on-demand video was already disrupting DVD and Blu-ray sales for the film and television industries. And video games were starting to be disrupted by Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo starting their own digital platforms. And there was a computer platform called Steam that allowed gamers to purchase computer games and download them directly to their PCs. GameStop's biggest moneymaker was people trading in secondhand video games and hardware that they could turn around and sell for a profit for at least 2 to 5 times what they had paid to buy them. It wasn't really possible for gamers to resell their digital games, though, so GameStop started trying to diversify by buying its way into digital distribution. It acquired Jolt Online Gaming and Congregate, which were both browser-based platforms for casual gamers. It bought 2 software platforms called Spawn Labs and Impulse, so it could try to offer its own streaming service and digital distribution services for PC games. It tried to get into electronics resale with the acquisition of secondhand consumer electronics retailer Buy Mytronics, and it took an ownership stake in Simply Mac, a retail brand designed to resell Apple products. It also tried to get into wireless mobile phone services by acquiring AT&T mobile phone retailer Spring Mobile, and then later acquiring and trying to operate over 500 AT&T store chains. It also tried to get into youth marketing with a pop-up store concept called GameStop Kids. And it also acquired an online media company called GeekNet, which owned a popular online retailer called ThinkGeek, for which GameStop even opened dozens of retail stores. Oh, and I do miss ThinkGeek. It was a great site. Everything up until this point might sound bad in hindsight, but these were actually sane and sensible moves for a company that knew the business was going to change eventually thanks to digital distribution. And GameStop still managed to have a strong handle on specialist distribution of video games, hardware, accessories, gift cards, and merchandise. But the problem was that GameStop had a growing reputation for being a really, really terrible place to both shop and to work. And the executive management's marketing decisions were based on growth through acquisition, not through focusing on their retail experience. Cracks started to form in this strategy before long. So, for example, digital distribution and streaming didn't work out, and both Spawn Labs and Impulse, which have been rebranded GameStop PC, were shut down in 2014. GameStop's rapid and aggressive expansion into Europe met a lot of pushback from consumers, and GameStop actually had to withdraw from some European countries like the UK, Northern Ireland, Portugal, and Spain. GameStop's revenues from digital distribution started to decline as gamers stopped going to GameStop stores to make their digital purchases from their trade-in credit with secondhand games or hardware or accessories. And instead, they just began buying games directly from the platforms that already existed: PlayStation Network, Xbox, Nintendo eShop, and Steam. And then in 2017, the news broke that GameStop's retail employees were feeling trapped by this policy called the Circle of Life, where onerous metrics were leading to individual employees being targeted and put under considerable performance pressure for not meeting their goals. So, in a store like GameStop, customers often want to walk in one of those stores and buy new games. But GameStop wanted them to consider secondhand games or trade in their old games or pre-order something new or purchase a rewards card while they were there. Employees who could not link the sale of a new game to one of those behaviors was held accountable. And the policy was not only viewed as unfair and punitive and led many employees to feel they needed to lie to customers to meet quotas, but it also caused them sometimes to tell customers they didn't have copies of new games or to discourage them from purchasing brand new hardware because they couldn't tie it to their metrics. If a customer wouldn't buy these products secondhand, they were sent elsewhere, like to a big box store or to the GameStop website, to make those purchases instead. This misguided program not only led to many good employees being disciplined or fired, but also upset customers when a gaming website called Kotaku wrote a piece about it. The whole point of GameStop's existence was supposed to be the availability of video games. Why would the corporation discourage employees from selling new copies of games by creating metrics that were antagonistic to both the customers and to the retail store staff? GameStop also started adjusting its inventory practices, first flooding its stores with non-gaming merchandise such as t-shirts, collectibles, collectible trading cards, and Funko Pops, but also requiring stores to work as fulfillment centers for online sales, giving the already overworked skeleton crews staffing stores a large number of online orders to process each day. During the busier fourth quarter of the year, sales staff had to choose between helping customers or filling online orders, and unfortunately, online orders couldn't pile up or the employees will be held responsible. And ThinkGeek, ThinkGeek, that beloved internet brand, withered and died in GameStop's hands, shuttering its online store in 2019, just 4 years into GameStop's ownership of it, and closing all of its retail stores not long after. GameStop altered the brand so significantly that customers abandoned it. And one of the biggest mistakes they made was in dropping all of the things that made ThinkGeek special. The weird culture, the April Fool's gags that sometimes will become actual products, the strange assortment of the odd and unusual, and instead replaced it with a bunch of branded merchandise similar to what GameStop was already selling in its stores. These are all marketing mistakes of the highest order, but we haven't even gotten to the really stupid stuff yet, which is instead driven by the financial side of the business. So in January of 2018, GameStop CEO resigned due to having a brain tumor, and he sadly died 2 months later. But over the next year, GameStop had a revolving door of CEOs that created such a crisis for investors that in 2020, investors began demanding a stockholder CEO. And had the COVID-19 pandemic not occurred and slowed everything down to a crawl, things might have moved faster. GameStop treated its employees horribly during 2020, by the way. It had, at that time, about 5,500 stores worldwide. And it suggested that its employees were essential workers who needed to violate the stay-at-home orders in many states and countries so they could work while failing to provide them with the proper personal protective equipment or cleaning supplies. Many hedge funds and investors began taking short positions on GameStop, believing that this business model was doomed. How could they possibly survive? Many analysts compared it to Blockbuster Video in its waning days. But you know what? In 2021, management finally did change, and that's when Ryan Cohen stepped in as chairman and Matt Furlong stepped in as CEO. Now, Matt obviously didn't make it very long in that role. Ryan is the current CEO, and he's one of those multi-billionaires who presumes that every move he makes is right and everyone else is wrong. Case in point, GameStop tried to sell off its French business last year, and Ryan Cohen sarcastically posted on X that the sale would include wokeness and DEI at no additional cost. Lovely guy, right? He made all his money with a lucky bet on the website Chewy, which he co-founded, and then sold to PetSmart for billions of dollars. And he also got extraordinarily lucky betting on Bed Bath & Beyond in 2022 before it went under, but he and his firm, RC Ventures, are actually being sued for insider trading on the nearly $50 million they netted from that exchange. So when I tell you that Ryan Cohen is known as the king of the meme stock, it might make the most recent chapter of GameStop's story make more sense because there were three things that happened that all made GameStop even more volatile. Number one was that GameStop became a meme stock in January of 2021 due to a bunch of online investors on Reddit and coattail riding hedge funds investing in it to trigger what's known as a short squeeze. This helped GameStop ultimately gain a ton of unexpected revenue as the stock price briefly surged to about 30 times its original value. And while it was able to pay off its debt and clear out its balance sheets, its stock is worth a fraction of that now. Number two, GameStop announced in May of 2021 it was starting a platform for NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, to take advantage of that corner of the larger blockchain fad. This move was enormously unpopular, and GameStop announced in early 2024 it was shuttering the marketplace completely. Number three, in May of 2025, GameStop announced it was purchasing 4,710 Bitcoin, which analysts estimate cost about $504 million. By the start of this year, that holding would have been worth about $368.4 million, or about 75% of its purchase value. Though GameStop claims it has not sold the Bitcoin off yet, I'm actually not sure what they're waiting for because that's a lot of money to tie up in a volatile cryptocurrency. So all three of these occurrences point to GameStop being run by investors who are trying to figure out how to cash out, not by managers who are trying to keep the company afloat. And Ryan Cohen is reportedly hoping to trigger a huge bonus he was promised by the board if he can get the market cap for GameStop up to $100 billion, a deal he made in exchange for accepting no guaranteed pay in his role as CEO that year. By the way, it's worth about 10% that right now. It's a wild situation that is likely doomed for failure. GameStop is not in a healthy place today. Last year, they closed 600 of their stores in the US, and they're closing another 400 to 500 this year. They claim to have about 1,600 stores in the US at the moment, but it's anyone's guess how many of those will survive into 2027. And that's not including the European stores that they're closing or trying to sell off as well. So their biggest problem at the moment is they have a retail footprint and they have staff, but they don't have customers. And that's why the eBay offer is so strange. Ryan Cohen's weird idea is to use these stores as fulfillment centers for eBay, but the most curious thing he's promising is reducing eBay's marketing spend by $1.2 billion, which is about half of what eBay spent on marketing in 2025 to acquire 1 million additional net active buyers. That, by the way, means that if those numbers are right, eBay spent $2,400 per customer in its customer acquisition cost for 2025, which is, a lot, but we have no idea if that number represents a positive or negative ROI. And we also don't know what the payback period is or the churn rate is on those customers. So, eBay is a pretty mature business. They may be close to their limit for growth, and that may be what it costs to get new customers. They may also indeed have far more potential than they're realizing, but it really seems like a predominantly brick and mortar business that's in danger of disappearing is probably not going to be a very valuable brand consultant to them. Securities analysts have long been saying that GameStop stock is overvalued and that its business practices are unsustainable. They're often compared to Blockbuster Video for being a dinosaur that doesn't know it's about to go extinct, but you know what? I would actually argue it is worse than that. GameStop knows it's doomed, and it's trying desperately to make a lot of noise to reassure us that it's healthy and vibrant when a walk into any GameStop store would tell you otherwise. So let me close by mentioning this. It's because I was so frustrated with GameStop's terrible marketing practices that I decided to go back to school, finish my business degree, and get into the field of marketing myself. I wanted to know that how these people sitting in an office in Grapevine, Texas, could make decisions that really impacted me as a store manager, but which were seemingly being made without any actual feedback or knowledge of what was happening in our stores day to day. GameStop was, to use eBay's wording, neither credible nor attractive, enough to keep me as an employee anyway, and that forced me to better myself. So I guess I do owe them for keeping me from being content as a retail manager and forcing me onto a path that allowed me to be telling their story to you today, not as an insider, but as a very jaded outsider. Well done, GameStop. You are truly terrible at what you do, and I'm a better person because of it. And all the GameStop frontline employees who are suffering right now, let me encourage you to do what I did and finish your college degree. A better life awaits you than going into work every day wondering if it's going to be your last. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. So here's a reminder. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. According to Mental Health America, nearly 1 in 5 American adults will have a diagnosable mental health condition in any given year, and 46% of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition at some point in their life. Half of those people will develop conditions by the age of 14. Mental health is something we all should take seriously. Please do not be afraid to seek help. You're not alone in your struggles, and if you know someone who's struggling with mental health conditions, please help in any way that you can. Sometimes all it takes is a simple text checking in on them, and it could end up saving their life. If you find yourself needing immediate help, please text or call the Suicide and Crisis Hotline at 988. And if you would like to learn more or you need assistance in finding help, you can visit Mental Health America's website at mhanational.org. There's also an option on the page to donate if you feel so inclined, and I hope that you will.